What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we have a video that I'm excited about. I asked the boys in the Patreon part of the Discord, patreon.com/Ron Stewart, just what kind of videos do you guys want to see? Because we doubled up on the wide receiver running back, we doubled up on the waiver wire videos. So we have 2 videos for rest of season, dynasty ranks, all that good stuff. I think we're going to get into dynasty next week, but this is going to be a really fun video where we kind of get into, I don't know what to call it yet. I don't know what this title is going to be, but these are, my favorite risers, players that I think are going to be league winners at the end of the season, just guys that I think are going to be really important on the back half of 2021. And these are the players that I think are going to be, on the championship teams. Now, we're going to have the obvious ones: Deebo Samuel, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp. All of those guys are going to be on championship teams in 2021. But there's going to be other guys that have the same opportunity to make that impact that aren't crystal clear right now, because the door is wide open. Derrick Henry, who was going to be, the far and away Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley, Christian McCaffrey, that legendary running back that wins leagues this year, right? Alvin Kamara last year had 6 touchdowns in the championship game. If you had Alvin Kamara, you won your fantasy league. Derrick Henry was going to be that same dude. But now that he's gone, we have the door open to not only Alvin Kamara, that'll be taken by Alvin Kamara, Eckler, Dalvin Cook, all of those guys. But then you have those under the radar guys that sneak in and also win you your leagues. Like last year, we had, at week 9, these guys weren't even on the radar, but we had David Montgomery, we had Jonathan Taylor. Those guys put up top 4 numbers in the playoff weeks. And if you didn't have Alvin Kamara, you needed to have one of those guys, or you needed to have Diontae Johnson, Brandon Ayuk, Calvin Ridley. So today I want to go over the guys that are really starting to grow on me and rise up the ranks as, second half league winners, either off of their recent performances or their future playoff schedule. We went into the strength of schedule. We checked out some playoff schedules. So we're going to talk about some guys that are going to be really important over these next 8 to 10 weeks. Now, before we get into that, make sure you go down below, subscribe, and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Let's go.
Thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm pretty cool.
So we're going to go over 5 players that are skyrocketing up my rankings that I think are going to be league winners on the back half of the 2021 season. I think a lot of you guys are going to hate this one. I get a lot of heat when I bring up this guy, but I want to bring him up one more time. Javonte Williams. He is my favorite candidate to be this year's Jonathan Taylor. And I know he hasn't been great this far, but let's put it this way. Through 8 weeks last year, Jonathan Taylor, a really, really skilled running back, was the RB19, averaging 12.7 PPR points per game. This year, we have Javonte Williams, the RB25, only 6 spots lower, averaging 10.1 points per game. It's not that far off, and I think he could go on a tear here for a few reasons. One being that he's talented. Like Jonathan Taylor, one of the most talented running backs in the league right now. Last year, he was amazing, and Javonte Williams, between the tackles, is explosive. Javonte Williams leads all running backs with at least 50 attempts and missed tackles forced per attempt, forcing a tackle on 36% of his runs. He ranks 10th in explosive run rate, which are runs of 10 yards or more, and 7th in yards after contact. He is extremely talented. He has the talent. That's what we're looking for. He has the talent to come out here and be that league-winning running back. He can put up those boom games. He can come out here and dominate. He also has something else going for him that Jonathan Taylor had going for him. His rest of season schedule is really soft. He has the easiest schedule for running backs these next 8-9 games. Jonathan Taylor last year, some of why he got there was really good talent. The other reason why he got there was because his schedule was so good. 6 of Jonathan Taylor's final 8 games last year were against bottom 8 teams in fantasy points to opposing running backs. If we look at Javonte Williams' final 8 games, 5 of those 8 are against bottom 8 teams in fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. So he has almost as strong of a schedule as Jonathan Taylor. He has some really light roads ahead of him. Now, you guys are probably yelling at your screen, cursing at me, but Melvin Gordon, I get that. Melvin Gordon hasn't been bad this year, but I'm outlining Javonte Williams' league-winning potential. And with Melvin Gordon, it's already baked into Javonte's price if you want to go out there and trade for him. And Javonte, the reason why I love Javonte is because he's talented, the rest of season schedule lines up, and he has multiple outs to pay off as a league-winning running back. Melvin Gordon could get hurt. Javonte Williams could play so well over these next however many games. Remember, these rookie running backs and wide receiver, they get better as the season goes on. We're only at the midway point. These guys really start to hit their stride in these next few weeks. They could also lose games. The Broncos could start to lose games. They get down bad. Maybe they're like 5-10 at a certain point, and all of a sudden they're like, okay, let's just see what we have in the rookie. Let's deploy Javonte Williams as a bell count and see what happens. Melvin Gordon isn't going to be here next season. So there's a bunch of different ways for Javonte to pay off, and I think that he could be. He has the potential to be one of those guys that you needed to have to go toe-to-toe with an Alvin Kamara, Eckler, Dalvin Cook, all of those guys. Next up, we have Diontae Johnson, and I'm falling in love with this man. He's moving up my ranks across the board. Rest of season ranks, he went from my wide receiver 16 to my wide receiver 12. I still think that might be too low. I'm sitting down Friday night to do my dynasty ranks, where I'm going to do a sweep through of all the dynasty ranks. I think that he is going to be maybe like a top 15 to 18 dynasty wide receiver. I'm done disrespecting this man. I'm done. This guy is a target hog technician. He shows up great in reception perception. He gets peppered with targets. I think he's probably, like, he feels very much like a young Keenan Allen. You know, if he was Keenan Allen and he didn't like lacerate his kidney and become injury prone and all that stuff. I mean, Diontae Johnson has had his fair share of injury problems, but he has that similar mold to a Keenan Allen, where he can get to a wide receiver one season off of being a technician, getting a ton of targets. He gets a lot of targets. This is a wild tweet from Ian Hartitz here, showing his targets since week 1 of last year in healthy games with Big Ben. Only 2 out of 18 of those games has he fallen below 10 targets. He's getting elite volume here. In 2021, in PPR points per game, he is 5th in expected points per game, which just takes into account volume, targets, like end zone targets, all that good stuff from the line of scrimmage. He is getting the volume of a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, which is insane. Now, he has 2 components here, because the volume is there, his route running is there, and the schedule really lightens up here. PFF has the Steelers wide receivers with the easiest schedule rest of season. I especially like their schedule in the playoffs. They play 2 top 6 teams in allowing points to wide receivers in weeks 14 and 15. Then they have a potential shootout against the Chiefs in week 16, and then a neutral game against the Cleveland Browns in week 17. Their schedule really lightens up here. Diontae Johnson's getting a lot of volume. I also like Claypool rest of season as well. I think these are 2 guys that could be, you know, very important pieces as we look from weeks 9 through 17. Another wide receiver I just keep putting on my rankings is A.J. Brown. He went from wide receiver 9 rest of season last week to wide receiver 5 in my rest of season ranks. A.J. Brown has the profile of a guy that you needed to have this year, especially because he has those spike games. He just had a 30-point game. If he gives you a 30-point game like he gave you last week, he could, you know, he gives you a 30-point game in the playoffs. He could single-handedly win you a league. We're talking about guys that are like skeleton keys to your fantasy football championships. And he's been unstoppable right now. And he's so efficient. His stat lines in the last 3 games, he had 9 targets, 7 catches, 91 yards, and a touchdown. Then, like, the efficiency is crazy on these last 2 games. He turned 9 targets into 8 catches, 133 yards, and a touchdown. Last week, he turns 11 targets into 10 catches, 155 yards, and a touchdown. It's because of the way he wins. Ben Gretsch talks about it all the time, but A.J. Brown is so great because he wins in all phases. He wins before the catch, so he's going to beat you with, his route running, his body control, contested catches. He'll beat you, on yards per route run, and then he will beat you on yak. If he gets the ball, he had a huge, I want to say he had a huge run after catch last week where he'll get the ball because he looks like a running back, that he'll get the ball and he'll turn it upfield and he'll just go into the end zone. There's videos of him like dragging 2 guys into the end zone. So when you take that into account, he wins in all phases. He has this huge ceiling where he's so efficient because of that he can turn 9 targets into a 27-point game, that he is extremely valuable. Now, he's even become more valuable as the main guy in this Titans offense because Derrick Henry, rest in peace to the big dog, he went down. The Titans are going to tilt more to the pass. They're going to give the ball more often to A.J. Brown, their best playmaker at this point. Julio Jones should come back and release some of the pressure. I'm not buying in to any of these. I've seen tweets and stuff that, I'm not bumping up A.J. Brown too much because, yes, there's going to be more looks his way, but he's going to get double teamed more often. He's going to be, the main focus of the defense. Here's the thing, guys. A.J. Brown is legitimately a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL. And if you believe that, then defenses giving more of their attention to A.J. Brown is whatever. All of the top wide receivers out there deal with that all the time. Justin Jefferson had one of the highest double rates last year, and he was still just fine. Then on top of that, he has a really juicy playoff schedule. First, he has the Steelers, who are giving up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, which is pretty good. Then he has the 49ers, which is kind of whatever. They're giving up the 25th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but the 49ers can score on any given week with Kyle Shanahan. That could be a potential shootout. Then the juiciest one, week 17, is against the Dolphins, who give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. That could be the monster A.J. Brown, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 catches game. That could be the one where you needed to have it in order to, match an Austin Eckler or match a Cooper Kupp. Then we have 2 guys that are a little bit more sneaky in terms of how they kind of fit into the puzzle here rest of season. And First, we have Tyler Lockett, who went from my wide receiver 28 to my wide receiver 23 rest of season. Nothing too crazy. He did just go off in week 8, but he just had his first 100-yard game since week 2. He's been pretty bad this year. He was the wide receiver 64 from weeks 3 through 7, but that's fine because we know that he's going to have, with Tyler Lockett, we know he's going to have those huge games every once in a while. I'm excited for Tyler Lockett because of 2 things. One, we get Russell Wilson back by week 12 at the absolute latest, who unlocks Tyler Lockett's, 50-point upside. Tyler Lockett is a guy who scored literally 50 points in a game last year. He has legit playoff game winning potential for you. He had 3 games last year where he went over 30 points, one of them being a 53-point bomb. And then on top of that, with Russell Wilson, with his weekly upside, his schedule gets pretty nice on the back end. His final 3 games are against the Rams, the Bears, and the Lions. Now, the Rams are giving up the 23rd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, but I'd expect Jalen Ramsey to shadow Metcalf, and then that's going to open things up for Lockett in a game that should be a shootout, right? Rams versus Seahawks, week 15, and fighting for playoff spots. Depends on where the Seahawks are at this point, or at that point. But with DK Metcalf usually getting shadowed by Jalen Ramsey, I think it frees up Tyler Lockett to give you one of those boom weeks. Then we have the Bears in week 16, which they're giving up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers, so that should be great. Then we have the Lions in week 17, which isn't as good of a matchup because they are allowing the 17th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. But that's not because they have a decent secondary. It's because they lose so early in games that teams just end up running the ball against them. They have one of the worst secondaries in the entire league. So Lockett has this potential to single-handedly advance your team during these playoff weeks where, all you need is a 30-plus point game from him 1 or 2 times in that span, and he could, be the guy in your flex spot, in your wide receiver 2 spot that puts you over the top against a Cooper Kupp, a Deebo Samuel, an Austin Eckler, all of those guys that could be league winners. He has that upside to be one of those puzzle pieces that you needed to advance. Now, I told you guys we were getting low key. This is a weird one. I'll be honest, this is a weird one. This isn't somebody that I've been really eyeing, but I took a look at all the playoff schedules, all that stuff. Logan Thomas might be the counter to a Travis Kelce, a Kyle Pitts, a Darren Waller, Mark Andrews, Kittle, all those guys you're going to see in the playoffs. If you have Logan Thomas, he might be who you need to offset those teams. He put up 12 points, 9 points, 12 points in his first 3 weeks as the PPR tight end 7 during that span. That's not bad. I listed, 5 tight ends out the gate, so another tight end. He's just behind those guys. He's due back in week 10 after the bye. He should be coming back here soon. We have kind of the possibility that Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to come back, but this guy's playoff schedule is pretty wild. He plays the Eagles twice, right? So he's going to play in Philadelphia in week 15, at home against Philadelphia in week 17. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Then they have a matchup against Dallas in Dallas, week 16, some shootout potential. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. So it's pretty wild how light his schedule is in the playoffs. He could have Ryan Fitzpatrick back by then. So the upside is definitely there for Logan Thomas to go out there and be one of these, cheap league winners as a nice counter to teams that have those elite tight ends. Now that's going to do it for us today, fellas. As always, I love you guys. We're almost at 7,000 subscribers. I cannot thank you guys enough for that. We were literally, we didn't even hit 1,000 subscribers until like the summer. I don't think we hit 1,000 subscribers until like June. Yeah, I think it literally wasn't until June that we hit 1,000. So the fact that we've 7x that in like the past like 3-4 months is just absolutely wild. I love all you guys. What else am I going to say? I got to go do the weekly rankings. Also, let me know how you guys felt about this video format where it wasn't quite my 5 biggest risers. It was just 5 guys that I really want to talk about in terms of guys that could be really important on the back half of the season. We're going to set aside a video or 2 every week to do, rest of season, dynasty stuff. Tomorrow, a lot of the patrons want to see this. I don't think it's going to do well in the algorithm, but I'm a man of the people. I'm going to do a video tomorrow where we go over all 12 of my managed league teams. So you guys can see, me, myself, am I any good at fantasy football? Are all my teams bad? Am I not making the playoffs on any of my teams? So we'll go over all those. We'll go over the standings, what my teams look like, kind of what my strategy is moving forward on all those leagues. So with that being said, I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yep. Juice.